Hi, my name is Andrew, and this is my Project Zero Extreme version. So in this video, I'll be going over what I did, how I implemented it, and some of the difficulties I ran into and how I resolved them. So for my Extreme version, I added a Rebel Cruiser to my solar system that the user could control with the arrow keys on the keyboard. And the Rebel Cruiser is affected by the gravitational effects of the planets. And here's a little demo of how it works. So as you can see, here's my Rebel Cruiser. If I press the up key, then the cruiser moves upward. If I press the left arrow key, it'll move leftward. And you'll also notice that the cruiser is affected by the gravitational effects of the other planets and the sun. As you see, it can be a little difficult to move in the direction I want it to at times because of the gravity effects. So in order to achieve this, I needed to figure out two main things. So first of all, I needed to add a new body to the array of bodies that were read from the file. And I also needed to determine how to read arrow key inputs to control the rocket. And actually one more thing, I needed to apply the appropriate physics so the cruiser could move and also be affected by other bodies. So adding the body was easy enough. I just increased the size of the array by 1 before reading the file to make room for our Rebel Cruiser. And then as the last element in the array, I initialized the Rebel Cruiser and gave it the appropriate parameters. Since we already implemented the physics of gravity for all the elements inside that array, the spaceship would already be affected by the other planets, and that takes care of the gravity effects on the spaceship. So off to a great start there. So the next thing was the harder part. So I needed to implement the controls for the spaceship and the physics. So I read through the documentation given on the project instructions page, and I came across the function isKeyPressed, which took a key value as a parameter, and so I made 4 conditionals, 1 for each arrow key. What I wanted the cruiser to do was move in the direction indicated by the pressed arrow key. So if I press up arrow, obviously the cruiser would move upward. At first, my intuition was to change the velocity of the object. So I was thinking that if I could change the velocity and make it move in the direction of the arrow key, so for example, if I press the right arrow, it would set the x velocity to some positive number, and the left arrow, if I press the left arrow, it would set the x velocity variable to some negative number. Same thing, and the same thing for the up and down arrow keys. But this didn't really work out well since the animation looked kind of weird, and also my code ran into a bunch of problems, so I had to rethink the physics a little bit. So now here's a little physics intuition that I was thinking about. So I wanted the arrow key to be like adding a force to the rocket, like I was pushing it. And since force is mass times acceleration, I realized I should be altering the acceleration, not the velocity. All right, so what I did was for each arrow key, I had the rocket move in the appropriate direction by applying some acceleration in the x or y direction. So for example, if I wanted it to move in the rightwards direction to that acceleration calculation that was done as part of the regular project, I added a positive acceleration value in the x direction. So I applied the same logic to all the arrow keys. So I set the acceleration to a really low value so the rocket wouldn't just like zoom off the screen. So it was around 0.5. And obviously the physics of this little simulation aren't an accurate representation of real life. And that's basically it. The hardest part of the project was learning how key inputs worked, getting familiar with all the functionality and documentation, and also make sure the existing code was modified correctly to account for the rocket ship. And that sums up my project. Thanks for listening.